Hey everybody, well here we go, Tools of the Trade, part 5. Quite a bit to cover in this one. This is just like a little auxiliary table I have off to the side here. You've probably seen it in the background. I don't think I've ever really shown it up close, but it's a good little work table for kind of getting away from the, I try and keep the mess off of here and keep it to over there. Always have one place clean to come over and work with something. So I'll jump right in, right off the bat. What's on this corner here? We got, guess what? More clamps. Clamps. Remember I said you can never get enough. So yeah, I've got a million of them. So here are these things. These are what masons use for tying in blocks to walls, to other existing walls. They're galvanized steel, but what they're good for is some of my really big pieces, my big heavy pieces. These are awesome, sort of ready to go hangers. I just have to bend that top piece there and it's ready to go, drop right into a piece, and it's a big, hefty, nice hanger. There's some different kinds back there. I use them from time to time, but just for big pieces. For little ones, they're really overkill. You don't need something that big. And speaking of hangers, here we've got, years ago, I actually bought these from a guy who I bought some plastic molds off of. That's these, whoops, that's these ones here. Great for your little, your little plastic molds, little plaque style. And then these ones are for larger ones. I just do myself, make it up just with some 18 gauge wire, or 16 gauge is fine. Just make a little loop, tie it off, and you got instant hangers. These guys, you've probably seen these before in the background. These funny little, it's not much of an invention. It was something I slapped together in about 2 seconds. When you're doing seam work, when you're doing some molds and your seam work and your seam is really big and you want it to stay nice and straight while the latex is drying, because sometimes it tends to curl over. This little thing, I just adjust the height up and down on this rod, and then I clamp it right onto the seam, pull it backwards, and in an hour or so it's dried enough that you can unclamp it and you keep your seam nice and straight. Because what happens is it curls over and then you get a ridiculous fight on your hands when you're trying to do your fiberglass. So you want to try and keep it stiff. Like other guys, it depends what you're using for your seaming material. If you're using a thicker cardstock sort of stuff, it's not going to bend like that. But I use magazine paper, and that's why it'll flop over. So it's one of the disadvantages of using the magazine paper. Down here, I have lots of different kinds of glass. You can see there's blue, purple. It's fire glass, what they put in those fire tables. And what I use it for is lots of different things. I either seed it into the top of some pots, especially like succulent planters, and then I'll wet polish it out. And exposes, you've seen concrete countertops with cool kind of glass in it. This is what I'm seeding with. It works really good, fairly inexpensive. You have to shop around on the web to find some. Or you can do stuff like this. I think I talked about that before, is when you put glass in an exposed area into a pot. That's what I use this for too. If somebody wants me to explain that better or show it one day, maybe I will. So move that to the side. This isn't usually the area where I keep my clay, but I just I brought it out here for the other day to show somebody, and I left it here. So this is the kind of clay I use. It's from Chavant, the plastiline. I think this is a medium hardness, but I still warm it up when I work with it. It's pretty hard to work with if you don't pre-warm it up a little bit. Good stuff. I love it. I've tried some other kinds. Not too crazy about it. Never used monster clay yet. That's one thing I always said I'm going to get my hands on one of these days. Not cheap. You'll find it if you go to buy it. But the good thing about it, it's reusable. You can put it on a model and strip it right off after you're finished with it and save it in a bag, and away you go. Because it doesn't get hard and doesn't dry out. Maybe I'll stay on this lower section here. So these are all registry keys that I got from Guns a few years ago. He did them on a sheet on his vacuum machine there. The good thing is they're reusable. I have some more still on the sheet. They're awesome. I wished I could find somebody, if somebody knows where to buy them in Canada. I know in the States there's some that don't ship them to Canada. I've looked and looked, have never been able to find them. I know in Great Britain, I follow a couple guys on Instagram, and they have great big sheets of it, and they just throw it away when they're finished with it. I wished, but if anybody knows where you can get these in Canada, somebody let me know. Just some sort of a form of a registry key. But like I said, they're great because they are reusable. You can use them over and over again. So this is just some Dremel bits. I just stuck it in here because it's easier when I'm over on a table just to grab out of here instead of fumbling through these little kits that come with your Dremel. Not much there. Here's just some big old chunks of leftover rubber from the bottom of your 5-gallon or 20-liter pail. I kept them. Don't ask me why. I always, in my head, try to justify that I could use it for something, but one of these days I'll probably just wind up throwing them out. Big metal gears. I've got this thing. I love steampunk. If people don't know what steampunk is, you can look it up online. I love the stuff. I really want to get into it bad, and I've been collecting stuff for quite a few years now. I've just never gotten around to making a piece. I talked at length once with Tuscany about it. He really likes it too. He thinks it's cool, but you'll see I've never really shown down the bottom there. I collect all kinds of pieces of odds and sods and cool pieces of steel. I've got other boxes all over the place here in my office full of different gears and things. So one of these days I'm going to make something, probably a mixed media thing with concrete and some crazy steel stuff. We'll see. Here's something. This is really old. I think I made these the first year I was in here. These concrete light bulbs with a screw in it. You can actually screw it in the wall and hang stuff off it like a clothes hanger. It was a good idea at the time, but never did anything with it after. I'm just going to try and set this down here and just set my camera so it's not so warbly. So these over here, I've shown these before. These are the little rubber skins that I made a couple of years ago. I got a couple different kinds here. This one is with urethane rubber that I used like out of the tube that you could buy at Home Depot. It worked quite well. This is just the regular latex on a piece of kale. It does really good. I use these for stamping clay or actually just doing pieces. It's just like a skin, a rubber skin. So there's all different kinds here. There's all different kinds of cabbages, and that's a cabbage as well, this one. But they work really well if you're ever fooling around and you want to grab a fresh leaf. That's like a baby rhubarb. If you ever want to fool around and just throw some latex on the leaf, I think there's about 5 coats I think I put on there. But yeah, I put a couple coats a day and then pull it off, and you got a cool little skin you can use for imprinting your clay. You can use for like an applique purpose, you know, putting some wet concrete and flipping it over, and then the next day peeling it off. Play with it. It's fun to do. Fun little thing that I found. Here's just some other stuff that I seed sometimes into the tops of pots and then polish out. And that's just some crushed seashells that you can buy, pieces. And then I'll just show you while I'm talking about it, since I'm talking about polishing, I'm just going to pull this down here. So that's my wet polisher there. It's a Makita. I usually don't go one brand over the other, but I have used others. I have seen other people use others. This one is really good. I really like what it can do. It's variable speeds. Variable speed unit. It's you hook it up to your hose over here. It's got a built-in GFI system, so you're not zapping yourself when it gets wet. These are your, whoops, of course it's going to get hung up. These are your different polishing discs, hook and loop. They stick like Velcro right onto the back, onto there. Obviously outside of the package works really good. Start at a 50 or a 60, and I only go up to about 200 to 400 is the max I go for what I'm doing. Like countertop guys, they have planetary wet grinders, and they'll go up to buff it with like a 3000 or what. So not necessary for what I'm doing, just on the top of pots and stuff. And I've done the odd small square piece that's been seated with glass or what, but these are readily available. There's all different brands, all different kinds, all different prices too. You can pay through the nose for these things as well. So I just wanted to show you. Like I said, I usually don't recommend one over the other, but my countertop buddy too, everybody in his class gets one of these when he does a class of international students. He gives them all one of these Makitas. He loves them. They're great for folks to use, easy to learn on. So let's go on the next little bit here. That is my clay tools. I just made this little caddy, just stuck some pipes together, made a little bottom for it. But these are all the different tools that I'm using. Lots of different scrapers. These are all just chisels, but they're great for doing detail work I use them for plaster too. In the clay, some of these are both plaster and clay. These are all the different picks I use for, like deveining leaves, but they're great for clay work. Stainless steel tools, smoothers, and these guys. Lots of different stuff, lots of different sizes of these scrapers as well too. These are stainless steel clay tools that I use too. They can also be used for spinning plaster. Shh, don't tell anybody. But yeah, this is mostly all for my clay work right here. And that's really nothing, just some Scotch tape. So this, I've covered this before, is these urethane textures that you can purchase. I get mine from Sculpture Supply Canada, but these are when you warm up your plastilina a little bit and press them in. There's all kinds of great textures, from skin textures to like a rattlesnake scales, rock scales, all rock scales, rock imprints. They're really cool. They're really neat to work with. You can match up a lot of stuff if you're doing a rework on an item and you're adding clay or adding some features. This is great for getting some textures in a hurry into a piece to replicate rocks or wood or skin. They're awesome. I highly recommend them if you can find them online. Here is one of my favorite tools, air dye. If you got a compressor big enough to run one of these guys, they're fantastic, especially for doing plaster. I found it really speeds things up. You can carve styrofoam with them. There's all kinds of different kind of bits that you can get, stone bits. These kind of stone bits you can use. These are awesome, really coarse for ripping up plaster in a hurry to get a shape really fast. Makes a mess, but big deal. You wear a dust mask and sweep up. But they're awesome. Lots of different attachments and tools. Works really good. If you haven't used one before, hang on tight. They got a lot of power to them, but a really good tool to play with. It's like a adult-sized Dremel. So speaking of Dremels, we've talked about this before. These are the little kits of diamond bits that I use for my Dremel, for doing like a lot of leaf work, plaster work, lots of different things. I love it. Like my Dremel, I'm already on my 3rd or 4th generation of Dremel already, because I burn them out because I use them a ton. But these little bits are awesome. I'll try and get a little closer so you can see the different shapes and sizes. They're pretty inexpensive. I think I got some in a package up here. Yeah, so I paid $9.95, and that's a 20-piece pack, and that's the ROK brand. They're cheap, but you know what? They work great. Like if you're working on a leaf, you can do 2-3 leaves with one bit, and then you throw it in the garbage, and it's not a big deal, right? For $10 for 20 pieces, it's pretty cheap. But you'll find a million other uses for them too. I do. I use them on all kinds of jobs, wood and metal. And speaking of, before I go too far, leave that air dye out of the way. These are the diamond core bits that I use for plaster, and for, you've seen me with that tufa stone outside, or I use them for, I have some pots that don't, some pots I don't put a hole in them. Some people don't want holes in them, so I do like a half and half, but sometimes I get down to a point where I've got a big bowl and it doesn't have a drainage hole in it, and people ask for one, so this is what I use. Goes really quick. Just dump some water in the bottom of your pot or your bowl that you're going to drill out, and hook this onto your drill, and away you go. It's easier to kind of go on a bit of an angle at first to get one corner down into it and then lean into it, and only takes a couple minutes to get through to the bottom. Just make sure you've got lots of water because it gets red hot. Don't touch it when you pull it out, but it makes a nice clean core hole. Instead of using like a masonry bit where you're going to get a blowout on the other side, these make a nice clean entrance and exit. They don't leave a big chunky chunk mark on them. Reasonably priced as well, I guess, for what you get out of the product there. I use them a ton before I have to go out and get another one. Just assorted wrenches and stuff. It's always the ones that you need, the 1/2 inch, the 3/4 inch, the 1/4 inch, and then the metrics, you know, the 12s and the 13s and 16s and the 7/16s, all the ones you need. I hate fumbling through my big bin full of wrenches and looking, especially if I've had somebody else in here and they go through your stuff and then you can never find the one you want. So I keep them over here so nobody knows where they are, so I always have them. Here's a variety of little tools for plaster and concrete. I've used them for different sizes of files. All these black handle ones are all different sorts. Good for scraping off edges or flashings or working on one of your leaf castings. Just more of the same. Different kinds, different sizes. These ones, you can tell they're covered with plaster because I use them mostly for plaster. Can be used for concrete too. They're stone rasps. I hope that's kind of coming in sort of clear. See if I can get it close and make it clear up. Ooh, nope. Sorry about that. But they're little rasps that you use for rocks, but it's great for scraping up plaster. Feels like I need a new set. These are sort of getting smooth, but all different sizes. But they work great too, like I said, for removing like lots of plaster in one place in a hurry. These are just assorted bolts that I use. I do some small statues, like some birds, that you can screw into the top of a 4x4 fence post. And these are just the little 2.5 or 3 inch bolts that I'll sit right, dunk, I'll put that right in after it's poured, head down, and then you've got this piece exposed so people can screw it right into the top of a fence post, a little birdie or a frog or something. So it's not easy if somebody's walking by your fence, they can't just steal it. Some people and myself, I've even glued them in so you can't get them out after. Just some assorted big steel drill bits. These are all connectors, 1/2 inch connectors for galvanized steel that you've seen me mount leaves. I mount these right inside of the leaf. Oh, here's one inside. I'll drill a hole through there and put a piece of metal through it so I can fan it out, and then I've got a connector to screw in another piece so you can mount a leaf. So you can just mount a leaf or do whatever you want. So that this piece would be inside of the leaf. I've shown that a few times there. If people got more questions, I can do another vid on it one day. And just more drill bits. Who doesn't have a ton of drill bits? Me. See, these come all the way from New Zealand. Some nice guy brought those for me. Okay, so we'll take a quick break here and we'll just move on to the other side. Okay, back we go. So we're back up the next level there. I didn't want to hop around too much. So this is just a lot of my backup stuff, a lot of odds and sods all over. A backup set of picks that I was mentioning in my clay kit here, but that's mostly for the leaves. Always handy to have extras. I mentioned in one of the last videos, I always have extra palette knives. They're handy when you get your favorites and one breaks. I always like to have a backup. These are like the rubber tipped clay smoothers. Really handy getting into tight crevices and stuff to smooth your clay out. If you've never used that clay before, I'll just give you a tip. Make sure you get everything off of the clay, like even a fingerprint. If you're going to paint latex on, it'll duplicate your fingerprint. So just try and smooth it out really, really good. Maybe another day I'll do another vid on smoothing out the clay. So up top, there's just more of the wire that I use for making my hangers. More of those diamond bits. Here's all the diamond polishing pads for my polisher, of course. Just some scraper bits here. Just odds and sods, drill bits, more pieces for a dremel, a little auger, a tile cutter, diamond cut tile cutter. These utility shears I love. They're great for fiberglass. If you use regular scissors to cut yourself a big chunk of, like some people just rip, but I need small strips, so I cut it first and then rip. If you use regular scissors on fiberglass, you'll go through your scissors so fast. These utility shears are awesome. You can get like a couple years out of them, but I always keep one handy just when it gets dull. It's a pain in the butt. Japanese pole saw, just when I do some other woodwork stuff. Nothing to do with concrete. Different countersink bits. These pry bars I love. They're great when you're pulling stuff out of molds, like you've seen when I did the bench molds, or even if you're having one of those tough pulls where your glass kind of gets locked into a pot or something. Great for helping to pry out. Some side snips in the center here for cutting your wire if you're doing a backup with wire. Extra core cutter there, 3/4 inch, so you can see the price there. It's 20 bucks, and you should get a year out of that thing easy if you're doing lots of pots. They last a long time. Different calipers I use for when you're doing clay or plaster. You want to make sure that your thickness is the same, right? Same as a clay. If your ear or an arm is so long, you want to know you've got it the same on both sides. So calipers are a really important tool. I've got another one. I don't know if you've seen it in the background on here too. A measuring one as well. They come in really handy. This guy here is the best scraper ever for scraping off my tables if you spill stuff, like, because I use all the melamine on for tables. So if you get paint, if you get sealer, or if you get anything stuck on there, plaster, after you plaster and it's dried plaster, it's a good tool for peeling off the gunk on your table. Here's just some smaller versions of those other things I haven't used yet. This I use a fair bit. These little tools. That was Guns found a guy who was doing like a Kickstart campaign. We bought them. It's a little unit that you can pin down on a board, and then you can you put your pen or pencil in these different sort of holes or slots, and you can make different shapes and perfect circles and ovals and all kinds of cool stuff if you're drawing stuff out to make templates. Some more pry bars. Lots of drill bits. These are masonry bits, and that big one is for an SDS drill. I think most people know if you're going to use drill bit, make sure you use a masonry bit. The masonry bit has that big, see the flat piece on either side there, the carbide tip. Don't be trying to use one of these kinds, like a metal one on concrete. It has to have that flattened carbide tip on it, or it's just not going to work. And all of these are big carbide bit ones there. And I think that's pretty well it. Except I guess I could show you this. So we asked how many molds I have. So these are all different plastic molds that I have. A big Rubbermaid container full of them. Tons of different plaques in there. Here's one that's there's more in the bottom. This was just fun stuff I used to do with my kids years ago. That you can just buy at a dollar store for Halloween and pour concrete in and put stuff out on your lawn on Halloween. And then here, these are all, here, I'll pull that up actually. These are all rubber molds with no backer. So those are ones that either you hang in a cup or hang over a bucket. I think this year there's a bunch of them. I'm getting tired of doing that. I'll probably make some backers for a whole bunch of these, but it's chock-a-block full. And that's about it. And my steel down there on the bottom, like I said, I collect. So that's it for this series. And next week we'll be moving on to more tools. Okay, folks, thanks for watching.